A few weeks ago, I spent a morning with a group of more than 20 middle-level managers from a major brand in apparel. We will call the company Big Brand. My reason for writing this report is the annoying feeling that you think that there is a limit to how much a company can improve, that a quantum jump in performance is possible for only small and maybe medium-sized companies. But when it comes to very large companies, the billions of dollars companies, an improvement of the magnitude of, for example, bringing their yearly net profit to be equal to their current annual sales in just a few years is really beyond a realistic possibility. Big Brand is one of the best companies in existence. There are very few people who haven't heard about Big Brand, and when you examine their financial performance, you see that their reputation is well-founded. Their annual sales are several billion US dollars, and their net profit on sales is about 10%. To make about 10% net profit on sales in the apparel industry is very good. My first question to the group was, by how much do you think you can increase your net profit? What will your net profit be, let's say, 5 years from now? There was a lot of debate in the room until the top gun, the director of finance, spoke up. His decisive answer was that in 5 years they would almost double their net profit to $1 billion per year. They are aware that it is quite an ambitious target, and they know it is not going to be easy. Nevertheless, as a company, they are determined that yes, they can make it. That ended the debate. Rather than starting to explore how they are going to achieve this ambitious target, I preferred to ask if they think that in 5 years they can reach a $4 billion net profit per year. Not surprisingly, they didn't need any guidance in answering this question. They made it clear that this number is totally, utterly unrealistic. Is it unrealistic? Increasing net profit can be achieved either through expansion or through improvement of the existing operation. I agree that for a large company to expand 5-fold in a few years is unrealistic. What about increasing net profit through improving the existing operations? Like almost any other company, they too have numerous initiatives for improvement. And like almost any other company, most improvement initiatives are centered mainly on cost savings, including trying to save on transportation and trying to find cheaper yet still acceptable suppliers. If a cost-saving program generates savings of a few million a year, it is regarded as a good initiative. If it saves tens of millions a year, it is regarded as exceptionally successful. It's no wonder that they regard increasing net profit by billions as impossible. To reveal the true potential for improvement, I wanted them to examine the phenomenon of shortages, of missing items. A shop has a list of the items, or SKUs, stock-keeping units, it has decided to hold. On average, what percentage of these SKUs is missing from the shops? I asked. Big Brand is in a position similar to that in many other brand environments. Their management knows that shortages, out-of-stock situations, are prevalent, but they don't have a clear idea of the magnitude. The managers in the room speculated that their shortages were close to 30%. How much do you lose in sales at the shops due to unavailability of products? I asked. Less than 30% was their answer, because many times a customer who cannot find one product will still buy an alternative product. I voiced my disagreement. I acknowledged that some customers do buy an alternative product, but there is another factor that caused me to believe that the lost sales are much higher than the percentage of SKUs that are missing. Is there anything that typifies the articles that are missing from the shops? I asked. They didn't have any trouble in answering that the missing articles are the ones for which demand was much higher than forecasted. Can we conclude that the demand for the missing items is above the average level of demand for most items available? I asked. Considering the fact that so many of the items available in the shop are slow movers, they had to agree. The next rhetorical question was, doesn't it mean that the effect on lost sales is much higher than the percentage of missing items? When many of them speculated that lost sales might be as high as 50%, I added, "If we take as a base the existing sales, doesn't it mean that the amount you lose due to shortages is close to what you are actually selling?" That shook them a bit. I continued to unfold the picture by drawing their attention to their warehouses. Items missing from big brands' warehouses are erased from the list of items that the shop should hold. Therefore, it is important to also investigate the additional impact of shortages at the warehouses. Products of big brand, like so many fashion products, have a lifetime in the market of 6 months. Their business is based on 2 seasons a year. Therefore, every 6 months they launch a new collection. They order and buy in batches of 6 months for the whole season. My question to them was, if one enters your central warehouse in a given region 3 weeks after the beginning of the season, will he find that some SKUs are already missing from the warehouse? Their answer was, yes, definitely. How can it be that these articles are already missing from the central warehouse after 3 weeks, when at the beginning of the season there was a quantity stored that was anticipated to last 6 months? Again, the answer was that these missing articles are the real high runners, the hot ones, the ones for which demand was much higher than was forecasted. How much in sales is lost from these items not being available? We went over the following chain of logic. If an item was depleted in 1 month, they actually lost its sales during the next 5 months. The lost sales of that item are probably equal to 5 times the amount that was sold. They agreed that, usually, demand for an item at the beginning of the season is not a peak but a reflection of genuine market demand. How many items are depleted after 3 weeks? After 6 weeks? After 3 months? They didn't have numerical answers, but their impression was that the number of items depleted within the first 3 months of the season is very significant. They would not be surprised if it is typically equal to 1/3 of all SKUs. As we said, items missing from a brand's warehouses are erased from the list of items that the shops should hold. Therefore, we should combine the impact of missing items in the shops with the impact of missing items in the warehouses. They agreed that we are dealing here with a phenomenon that is, most probably, equal or higher than the total amount of realized sales. Then, I encouraged them to convert this realization into the bottom line impact, to estimate how big of an impact shortages have on the net profit of the company. I asked, if the company succeeds in eliminating shortages, by how much should it expect its net profit to increase? After some discussion, they reached the conclusion that if by some miracle the shops will not suffer from any shortages, Big Brand would need to increase only modestly its infrastructure to support the resulting increase in sales. The resulting increase in sales would not be associated with a meaningful increase in operating expenses. The only cost that would go up is the amount of money they will have to pay their suppliers for the additional goods. But since they purchase the goods for a price that is only 1/5 of their selling price, 80% of the money generated by the increase in sales resulting from the reduction in shortages goes directly to the bottom line. There was quiet in the room when the unavoidable conclusion crystallized. Eliminating shortages has an impact on net profit that is probably larger than $4 billion a year. How come they had not fully realized it before? I shared with them my speculation that this lack of awareness stems from their particular environment. The culture in that industry is dominated by the fact that for several generations they have been dealing with an environment in which the lifetime of the products in the market, 6 months, is shorter than the time to supply, 1.5 years. For example, the fabric is selected by the brand companies in January or February for the next year's summer season. This is an extremely difficult situation to deal with, as more and more industries, for example electronics, that are drifting into such an environment are starting to painfully realize. No wonder that, with time, this industry developed a protective mechanism, a culture of camouflaging the painful problems so that they can be embraced. For example, how does the industry cope with the phenomenon of huge sales losses on items that become unavailable long before the end of the season? They do not give it a name that clearly shows the negative impact. Instead, they camouflage it with a positive title. They call it sold out. They all laughed when they admitted that they actually regard sold out as something positive. In the same way, the industry hides from itself the phenomenon that is the other side of the same coin. The terms obsolescence and obsolete products do not exist in this industry. Together, we explored how the fashion industry hides the obsolescence from itself. At the brand level, it is hidden under the title outlet sales. What is the reduction in price given in the outlet? It is never in the range of 5 to 10%. It is a minimum of 30%, and a 70% reduction is quite common. This is merchandise that the brands are stuck with and are unable to push into retail. On top of that, there is the obsolescence in the inventory the retailers are holding. Once again, it is not called obsolescence. It is called end-of-the-season clearance sale. Again, the price reduction offered at an end-of-the-season sale is above the range of 5 to 10%, and this sale starts at least a month, if not two, before the end of the season. The amount of obsolescence in the system is probably equal to 30% or more of the total items produced. This is not a small phenomenon. What we must bear in mind is that these two phenomena coexist. For a huge number of SKUs, there are considerable shortages, while at the same time, for not a smaller number of SKUs, there are enormous surpluses. How come? I asked. They didn't have much trouble answering. The answer is obvious to anybody in the trade. When do they decide on the quantities to be produced of each SKU? Before the beginning of the season. Do they know at that stage what the actual demand per SKU will be? Of course not. The room was filled with their nasty remarks about the forecast. They ridiculed the notion that anybody can forecast more than 6 months in advance the demand on any SKU level. The forecast is not even considered by them to be an educated guess. No wonder that for about half the items the forecast is too low, leading to shortages, and for the other half the forecast is too high, leading to obsolescence. But can they do anything about it? Yes, they can, provided that they will abandon the illusion created by the forecast, the illusion that the future demand is known. How should they operate if their starting assumption is that they do not know the future demand per SKU? We started to examine the possibilities by exploring when they can get reliable knowledge of which SKUs are moving well and which are not. They claimed that after the first 2 weeks of the season they have that knowledge, but it's already too late. Is it? What would happen if the reaction time of the supply chain were much faster? But currently it takes 2 months for the suppliers to produce the goods, they rightfully claimed. Why? I asked. Why is it that a pair of shoes or a garment that takes less than 30 minutes net time to produce should be subject to a production lead time of 2 months? Because we order in very large quantities, was their embarrassed answer. We order the quantity forecasted for the entire season. Will ordering much smaller quantities more frequently raise the price? Not as long as the total amount ordered per season is roughly the same or larger, was their answer. But what about the time to transport the goods? They asked. Most of the production is done in the Far East. There are airplanes, was my flat answer. It didn't take long before the basis of the new mode of operations was sketched out. They could start the season with just 1 month of inventory and use the first 2 or 3 weeks to get real knowledge of what was moving and what was not. Based on actual consumption, they would then replenish to the warehouses. Of course, they would have to convince the suppliers to work with much smaller batches, which was not a big deal since producing apparel in smaller batches does not necessitate more capacity. Of course, for the high runners that were revealed in the first 2 weeks, they would have to prepare the system to air freight the goods needed for the next few weeks, as well as to ship another quantity by sea. Overall, it should be expected that less than 20% of the goods would be sent by air rather than sea. They quickly realized that even though transporting by air is much more expensive than sea, relative to the selling price, or even worse, relative to not selling, it is negligible. This idea, which they regarded as a major system-wide change, though still logical and doable, would reduce the shortages to a mere fraction of what they are today, and almost eliminate the obsolescence. There were pleased murmurs in the room when the conclusion was explicitly verbalized. This plan by itself would probably be enough to reach the realistic target of $4 billion per year net profit. But we had just started. Let's see if we can agree on the next guiding concept, I said. As long as the end consumer hasn't bought, nobody in the supply chain has sold. I was surprised that they all supported that statement. They continued to support it even when I drew this blunt conclusion. Even though on the financial books Big Brand recognizes a sale whenever it delivers the goods to retail, they should not consider the job finished until the end consumer has bought, not before. What can they do after the goods have been delivered to the retailer? To reach the answer, we examined the typical behavior of their clients. To secure the price, the retailer buys from Big Brand in very large quantities. This purchase is also based on a long-term forecast. It is no wonder that about 1/3 of the products they buy are slow movers. Now, I asked them, do you agree that in retail what is not displayed is not sold? That is almost the motto of the trade, so of course they agreed. Then we continued to draw the chain of cause and effect. When the retailer starts to realize that he is holding a lot of relatively slow movers, he also realizes that unless he does something, these slow movers will be sold only at the end of the season for a loss. So what is the natural reaction? These slow movers are now getting a good visual display that is better than what they deserve. And they get the attention of the sales force more than they deserve, at the expense of the attention and display that the better runners should get. How much is lost in sales due to this practice? We agreed that nobody knows, but there is one thing everybody knows. It is significant. What would happen, I asked, if Big Brand were to make this offer to their retailers? Will you accept back any merchandise for a full refund? Getting harsh responses from all sides, I took a step back. When the room became quiet again, I offered another question, this time choosing my words more carefully. Once there are no shortages to speak of in the warehouses, will Big Brand be able to promise the shops a 2-day delivery on any reasonable order? The warehouses of Big Brand are located within a 2-day drive, maximum, from almost all shops. So it didn't take long for them to come to the conclusion that it would be feasible to provide such service, and that it would have only a modest impact, if any, on the cost of transportation. I highlighted that with such service, and basing the price on a shop's total sales of Big Brand products rather than on the size of individual orders, the shops would no longer have the pressure to hold mountains of inventories. Now, suppose that the shops were to take advantage of Big Brand's excellent service and order every day the items that were sold that day. Under those conditions, we agreed that a shop should hold only what is needed for proper visual display, plus the quantity that the shop optimistically expects to sell in the following 2 days. Relative to today's situation, the inventories that the shop would hold would be much smaller. Now I could raise the question again. What will then happen if Big Brand offers to the retailers that order daily that it will accept back any merchandise for a full refund? After some calmer discussion, they reached the conclusion that the returns would not be too high and that they do have the outlets in place to get rid of them. Now they were willing to continue listening. The approach is this. Let's make sure that the best display and the attention of the sales force is devoted to the best-selling products. Accepting back the slow movers for a full refund will go a long way toward enhancing the right behavior in retail. As long as we believe that display and a gentle push from the shop's sales force are important, we must conclude that sales will grow. How much? Their estimates of the resulting increase in sales were all over the map. Rather than pushing for an agreed speculative number, I stated that we could do much more. Now that our solution provides essential information we didn't have before, which SKU has sold in which shop every day, Big Brand should take an active role. It should suggest to the retailer that they send back the items that they are not moving in their store, and the retailer should take those items that are moving nicely in other stores located in their region. If this is done, the shops will hold on their shelves a much higher percentage of good movers. How much will sales go up? Nobody knows, but the consensus was that it's big, very big. All of this set the stage for the climax, for the action that would have the biggest impact. A store knows that a fresh collection attracts clients to the store. We discussed that it is the reason chains and shops are putting a lot of pressure on Big Brand to switch from 2 collections per year to 4 collections per year. They pointed out that considering the amount of effort and cost required, the mere fact that Big Brand now seriously considers this request shows that everyone recognizes that such a move would have a major impact on total sales. But does Big Brand have to put forth the mammoth effort needed to provide 4 collections per year? How many variations per season does Big Brand design, produce, and store in their warehouses? Their surprising answer was in the vicinity of 80,000 variations per season. Variation does not include size, so the number of SKUs produced and stored is far larger. I was expecting a large number, but not quite so large. Why such a huge number? I asked, and they explained. It is due to the need to convince the clients, the retail chains, to buy from Big Brand. Different retailers have different tastes and predictions about the market, so Big Brand has to design, produce, and store an enormous number of variations if they want to be a major supplier to so many different chains. And how many variations does a store hold, even a large store? Of our products? Less than 2,000, was their answer. These vastly different numbers provided the basis to draw some conclusions. In almost any given store, the variety of items the consumer sees is just a tiny fraction of what is actually available. Once Big Brand starts replenishing daily to the stores and accepting back items from the stores, it is possible to make sure that stores will have a new collection every month, with no increase in the number of items that Big Brand currently designs, produces, and warehouses. The head of finance provided a perfect ending when he summarized, "Reaching $4 billion net profit per year is starting to look conservative."